Well, hello and welcome to another full product tutorial video here from Zenatta Consulting. My name is Tyler Colt, and in this video, we're going to be walking through Zoho SalesIQ. This is an application that we use pretty often, both internally and for our clients. It's also one that I don't think we have done a full tutorial on since maybe like 2020. Like, we still get comments and questions on it, and that video is pretty outdated now. So we thought, hey, let's get a new one out here for everybody. So yeah, hope you do find this useful. I do want to ask, if you do, please make sure to like and subscribe down below. That really does help us out. And if this sparks any comments, feedback, video requests, please leave that in the comment section, as we do try to read and respond to each and every one of those. So without any further ado, let's jump into our agenda for this session. Alrighty, so agenda here for our session. We're going to go through a couple high-level things and then a few more specific features that most people use. So right out of the gate, we're going to do kind of our traditional application overview. Going to walk you through what you're going to see when you actually open up this app. Then we'll get into the settings. There are a lot of settings. We might not go through every single one, but we're going to cover all of the ones that are going to be most relevant for you and where to find certain things that I have always thought are a little bit hidden. I'm going to sprinkle a couple of those in as we go. Next, we're going to get into customization. So how do we affect how this is going to look and feel for our users on the front end when they actually land on the website? Then we'll get into automation and bots. Bots we're going to touch on quickly. We do have a couple videos on the channel breaking them down in more detail. Those are more recent and should still be viable. But I'm going to break down the differences between them and where you might want to use them in your workflow. And then last but not least, we're going to go through some of the Zoho app integrations that you're very likely going to need. So yeah, without any further ado, let's jump into the application overview. All right, here we go. So right now where we've landed, this is kind of where you're going to land when you open up Zoho SalesIQ. So across the left-hand side of the screen are where we're going to break down kind of the different sections that users are going to interact with. Up here in the top right under this little settings cog, that's where all the nitty-gritty is. So we're going to circle back around to that section in part 2 of our flow. But for now, we're going to cover these sections on the left and what they all mean. So here on the live view, this is kind of a way to get at a glance, get a view of who is on your website right now. Right? So before this session, what I did is installed the SalesIQ tracking code on our website called Podcaster Zen. This is another service that we offer kind of if people want us to produce content like this webinar for them. But I went ahead and dropped it here because it doesn't get a ton of traffic, right? It's kind of a good place for us to go through this walkthrough. So I have landed on this website, a little while back as we were prepping for this show. We'll see that the SalesIQ chat widget is in the bottom right, but I have not actually interacted with this yet, right? I've not submitted a chat. I've not given my name or email, anything like that. I'm just here on the site. And so because I've been on the site for a while, I'm kind of moving through these rings, right? So I've been here for about 10 minutes. And so I can see, yep, this is me. I'm in Fort Collins. That looks all right. And from this live view, we can actually start a proactive chat. So I'll show a couple different ways that chats can occur. But if I want to start a proactive chat, I can say, example chat here. And now on the flip side, over on my web visitor, now I've been chatted, right? So people actually use this to proactively engage web visitors. Maybe somebody is on a product specific page, right? You want to say, hey, any questions about this product? Hey, any questions about this service, right? You can actually proactively engage people while they are on the site. And a lot of times that'll be done here through that live view. And so we'll see visitors kind of move through this flow. You can also look at the live view based on a list, right? Where we're seeing basically people broken down into different categories, right? If they've been on for 10 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, or they've just landed on the site. So that'll kind of cover our live view. Now, as we move down the page over here on the left-hand side, we'll see that we do have a list of my chats. These are chats that have been invoked by that particular user. and can be tracked over time. And so if we come in and we look at, maybe our visitor, and our visitor, let's say they respond, this should now notify us back inside of the SalesIQ that I have this chat, right? So you'll notice it doesn't actually count it as my chat, like a chat under my user account, until there's been some kind of engagement back from that person, right? So just that proactive message, that's just the way that you're trying to start a chat, but it's not really considered a chat until both people communicate. So within here, this just gives really quick and easy UI to be able to respond and engage with this particular chatter. As you'll see, this little gray text says type a slash for a canned reply. That's just an easy way to give us some default things that we can use in these chats. Over here on the right-hand side is going to be the summary of this particular person. We'll get into the integrations piece in a little bit, but more and more Zoho data is going to start showing up correlated to this chatter as we have those integrations installed, right? So that kind of covers my chats. Again, pretty simple interface, right? We're basically able to see chats that we have active, chats that we've missed, or chats that have been completed, right? And so eventually as this chat, maybe the user leaves the website, maybe I say, you know what, this is spam. I'm just going to end this chat. And now it's moved over here to closed. And our web visitor has been, they've gotten their chat ended. Now, as those chats are being completed, by default, it is going to provide them the opportunity to give some ratings and feedback. Now, as a web visitor, I loved this chat. I thought this was great. So I'm going to give them a happy response and say best chat ever, and go ahead and submit that. It's just a quick and easy way to actually be gathering some feedback from the people that are on your site about how these chats are going. I would say very important, whether you're doing this manually or via a bot, to always try to gather feedback, right? Make sure that you're doing a good job in these interactions. Now, visitors, this is a section that's going to break down into a few different categories, right? So right off the top, when it comes to visitors, when they land on the site, they're going to be assigned an ID, right? If you'll notice in this chat, I never provided my name and email, right? It never actually got that data about me. And so it's basically just given me a number, but it knows who I am. It knows my device ID. It knows which IP I came in from. So in the future, even if I don't have a name, I can actually correlate future visits back to that original person. Now, what we'll also see inside of the visitors tab is a section for leads, contacts, and companies, right? So this is essentially once we start getting more context about who this person is, they can become a more specific type of record in our system. Right. So a lot of these people that are unidentified are going to fall into leads. Whereas if someone's going to be a contact, we do need that name and email. Right. So no one has actually fit that criteria based on the existing chats that have actually occurred, the chats and visits, I should say, that have occurred on the site. Moving down the left-hand bar, we do have a set for all chats. Now, this is something that not all users are going to have access to. Right. Maybe this is just for managers, for admins. Right. But maybe we don't want customer support agents seeing each other's communications. Maybe they're sales, maybe they're, operations, whatever it may be. We can actually bifurcate things and keep all chats private internally, other than through some type of management structure in our permissions, right? That will allow only certain subsets of users to see all of the chats that have ever occurred. Now, when we get into calls, this is a newer feature inside of SalesIQ, where you can actually do a voice chat with a chatter through the site. Now, in our demo account here, we don't have a voice over IP integrated for this, so I'm not going to demo that for now, but it is a very similar flow, right? So you're able to essentially come in, instigate a chat or a call via that widget, and then that will all be logged here inside of SalesIQ. Now, one nice thing about this is it will put them in a queue. So if you're using this for like a customer support type of use case, it kind of solves for that, right? Where I click it, I get on a call, it says, hey, you know what, you're 10th in queue, estimated time is 10 minutes. And as people are completing any of their calls, they can go pick up the next one from the queue and help with that particular visitor. Feedback on the left, this is basically just a summary of all chats where there was feedback. I'm doing great. I have 100% happy in my chats, so I'm the best support agent ever. But you'll be able to see all of that here inside of the feedback section. And you can also slice it based on feedback that's only for my chats versus if you are a manager, right? You could go ahead and say, I want to see feedback for all chats. Now you might be thinking, well, that's great, right? I can see these feedback responses. I can see all these chats, but how do I know how we're doing, right? At a high level, are we doing well on average in our chats? Are we chatting with a lot of people or not many people, right? And that's where the report section is going to come in. So one thing that you are going to see, and I'll explain this a little more when we get into our settings walkthrough, is a lot of things are going to be sliced by the brand that you're using for a particular chat. And what I mean by that, and I'll show you when we get the code, but this is a chat widget specific to one brand. So you could actually be running more than one brand out of SalesIQ, as long as you're very intentional and specific about where you get certain data from. Right, so here, jumping back into the reports, right, on a brand basis, we're able to start getting data about the total amount of visits, the page views, the chats, right, what types of devices people are coming from. I'll tell you, your web developer is going to love this data, right, being able to understand that, hey, a lot of people are coming in mobile. Let's make sure we're optimized for that. One thing that SalesIQ does behind the scenes that I don't think it gets enough credit for is outside of just the chat feature, it's also a great web engagement tracker, right? It's tracking every visitor, every page visit, how long they're on it, where they came from, when they came back, right? It's a lot of data. And a lot of the times we'll pull that into Zoho Analytics and do some reporting there. But you do actually get some of the high level data here just natively inside of SalesIQ. Now, again, in terms of the reports, we've got a whole bunch of different types, right? Reports based on a brand, reports based on specific operators, right? I'm not going to go too nitty gritty on this, but just note these kind of come out of the box as a default feature. They're mildly customizable, right? So I can apply some filters, I can apply some date periods, but to a degree, it is a bit of what you see is what you get when it comes to these native reports that are inside of SalesIQ. Now, last section here is going to be the resources, and this breaks down into a few important sections. Now, I'm going to cover one of them specifically, and then these other 5 are all going to go into one big group, and I'll explain why. So a canned reply is essentially something that, like I mentioned when I was doing the chat, I could have a canned reply for please book a meeting at zenatta.com, right? And I can go ahead and actually just use this in any future chats, right? Just by pressing / and pulling out this canned reply. So good thing to do for things that we're chatting all the time. Hey, book a meeting. Hey, you need to talk to support, not sales. I'm going to transfer you over, right? Any of those types of commonly used phrases. Now, resources is a little different. So resources breaks down into FAQs, so a quick question answer, an article where this is going to be something that's more long form, right? Maybe a whole guide on how to access billing information, for example here. Small talk, this is basically something that is going to affect your bots, but not both bots. Just one of the bots is going to be affected by small talk. I will share that when we get to our bots section. Business terms, very similar, right? So here I have an example. We do Zoho consulting. Maybe I want to have some, synonyms, right? So maybe a transaction, if they hear invoice, if they hear bill, if they hear payment, you can teach a bot that those are similar words to the word transaction, right? And so it can start guessing at those synonyms and maybe helping your users a little bit more specifically. And then UAQs are basically unanswered questions that have been gathered by the bots. Again, not by both bots, but by one of the 2 types of bots that exist here in SalesIQ. Again, we'll get into all that in a lot more detail a little bit later. But with that should cover our kind of initial walkthrough here. Next section is going to be settings. So let's jump on into that. All right, so settings. There are many, right? But they're manageable. So I'm jumping into settings here, and we're going to go left to right. Again, we're not going to cover every single one of these, but we're going to cover some of the important ones. All right, so under general, I'm not going to show my profile because I'm going to show that as I go through operators. But company profile, this is just some very high level information. Your address, your phone, your email, right? This is in every single Zoho app. You know what this is. We don't need to worry too much about it. Now, operators, this is where you get into some of the settings that I think are a little bit hidden at the end of the day. So when I open an operator, this is now going to be basically the same page as if I clicked my profile, right? Except from the operators, I can update settings for anybody who's in the org. So I normally just access it through the operators tab. Now here under settings, this little sub settings, right? We're going layers deep, right? It's not just one layer of settings, we're going two. We're able to customize some of this info. Now, again, a lot of this is basic stuff, right? Your name, a little description of you, date of birth if you care about that. But here are things that are important about operators. One, associating them to departments. It's very important, right? You could have a sales department and a customer service department. You need to make sure people are associated to the right ones. Another one, concurrent chat limit. A lot of the times, this will be set at 0 for a new user. That means they are never available for a chat. So you'll be trying to test your bot and it'll keep saying, we're offline, we're offline. You're like, what's going on? I'm online. No, you're not. You might be online, but if you're not set up to take a chat, it won't present you as someone who is online. Now, that seems a little backwards, but it actually makes sense, right? Because a manager might be logged in, but they don't take chats. It's not in their job description, right? So the bot actually should not think that we're online unless a user who can take a chat is also online. So a couple of those settings here are really important to just make sure that those are dialed in. I'm going to skip through a lot of these. These are just some of the back end things, right? Things like that. Now, visitor engagement. This is another one, very important. If this is turned off, they will never be able to take a chat. They will never show as online when you get into the chat widget. So this is kind of our binary state, right? Yes or no, they can take a chat. And then up here, this is how many chats they can take. And so the reason I say it's hidden is that a lot of people get to concurrent chat. They turn it to 5, right? And they think, okay, now this user can take chats. Maybe they can. Maybe they can if they've been enabled for visitor engagement. So again, just keeping these things in mind, you want to make sure these are set up for all your various users as you actually onboard them onto the application. Now, under personalize, we have a few important sections here. I'm going to go into brands first. This is probably where you go first when you're setting up this application. And the reason for that is that within a particular brand, this is where we get our installation info. Very important. Before the webinar and Freddie and I were setting all this up, I actually goofed this up. I put in the wrong, code. And so I'm here testing the bots like, what's going on? What's going on? Oh, I didn't put the right embed code on. So underneath that embed settings under the website for that particular brand, we have the code that will actually activate the SalesIQ on the website. If you're on WordPress, you can use a really easy little plugin and put this in. If you're on any other site, you can just put this tracking script on any page that you care about tracking. What a lot of people do is just put it on like a universal section of the site, like the bottom of the body, the top of the footer, right? Things like that, just to make sure that it's everywhere. Now, important thing to note, putting this on your website does not inherently mean that there is a chat bot. It just means that at a baseline, the tracking is going to be occurring in the background. So step 1, we've got that bot installed. We've dropped the code on the website. Step 2, we're going to do some personalization, right? So we're actually going to determine should they be able to chat or call us. How do we want this thing to look at the bottom right of the page, right? So maybe I go, hey, you know what? Personally, I like this one the most. Maybe I want to move it over to this little type of widget, right? I'm going to leave it here for right now. Now within this, right, of course, we can change things like the widget. Like I might say, hey, you, make it a little more personal rather than just, hey, customer, right? So you can kind of make any of these adjustments that you'd like. Do your color coding, if you want to show your logo, the image of the operator, right? Things like that, just to make the bot a little bit more personable when they land on the page. Now, section 2 of the customization is going to come in under the flow controls. And some of the flow controls kind of affect the look and feel, right? So it's kind of flow controls and it's kind of personalization, right? So here we can actually determine what fields do we want to capture at the beginning of a chat. Now, there's multiple flows that you can use, right? So maybe I want to gather data more conversationally, where now it's going to ask me, how would you like to be addressed? Where your visitor's reply now becomes their name, right? And then it can ask, and how should I follow up via email? And, their reply becomes their email address. Now, this is all great. I love the conversational form. It just depends on how much you trust the chatters to provide data in a structured form. So a lot of the times I start out with it more form-like, right? And then as we go, maybe we bake in, move it over to conversational after we've kind of examined how the users interact with the bot. Now, in terms of flow, right, this is essentially, a couple things that you can do determining the like speed and type of responses that are being given out, right? So if you want to essentially set a waiting time, a web visitor puts a chat, we're going to call it in the queue for 60 seconds before we say we missed it, right? As we go down, we're able to do a lot of these different configurations. I'm not going to go in each individual one, or this will be a 3-hour webinar. But you can adjust things like how long it should wait for an idle chat, what it should say when it automatically ends a chat, right? Things like that, just to give the bot or the chat widget as many of the features as you need. This is also where we'll go if we want to turn off feedback, right? If we don't care about the operator ratings, then you can turn those off here for an individual brand. Last but not least, under communication or configurations, this is kind of like what's going to happen at the tail end and some of the things that can happen during, right? So do we want transcripts to be emailed out? Should people be able to share files, right? Things like that that might matter for us all just live under the configuration tab. Now, a couple other things under personalized that we'll go through just very quickly. Global settings, these are going to have, again, menus on menus. So I'm not going to go through all of these. These are going to be essentially some of the options for like how an operator can interact in the chat. Should they be able to do audio calls, screen shares, things like that. Visitor interface is what the visitor is going to see when they land. Email is going to come in if you want certain monthly reports, daily reports, things like that. All of these kind of top level settings that apply to the entire organization are going to be here under global settings. Again, I'm not going to worry too much about those. The rest under personalized are pretty self-explanatory. Email templates are basically things you can save and use after a chat. Profanity library, this is actually really great. You can put in words that SalesIQ will automatically filter out so that your reps don't face like abusive or bad language, just to protect your team from that type of stuff. Messaging channels, this is essentially all of the different ways that you can integrate a SalesIQ chat window with something that is not just chat, right? So they could go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I'm leaving the site. Here's my WhatsApp number. Please follow up with me there, right? And you can still, using the chat window, continue to communicate with them just via a different platform. Automate, we're going to come back to. Controls, these are essentially things for like the admins to be looking at. So conversation monitors essentially give you a way to peek in on other people's chats. Again, if you're a manager. Block IP, if you find out that maybe you're getting spam from certain locations, you can block those. Do not track, you're essentially able to add certain people, certain IP addresses into a list that says, hey, don't cookie me. I don't want you to know when I come back, when I interact with the site. Bots, again, we're going to circle back on these. We'll spend some good time there. And then developers, this gets into a lot of our integrations and workflows there. So we'll have kind of a whole section on that coming up for you a little bit later in the show. So with that, I think we are ready to jump on into our next section. Alrighty, so next section here, getting into some of the real good stuff here under automation and bots. Astute viewers might remember that in the agenda, I talked about going through customization. We kind of realized in the flow of this, I did that in that last section. Customization would really just be talking about some of those things in the brand sections, right? So the color coding, the, choosing some of the auto response messages. So that was kind of covered. We don't want to waste your guys' time, so we're getting right into some of the good stuff here. So automation, we're going to do that first. These are a lot of different things that are trigger-based and happening in the background, right? So a trigger here, when it comes to SalesIQ, it's going to feel pretty similar to setting up something like a workflow inside of Zoho CRM, right? So an example that we could say is that once a certain number of pages has been accessed, so maybe we want to say greater than 4 pages have been accessed by a particular viewer. This person obviously would have need to land on the website, but maybe want to have a certain custom action. Won't get into this in too much detail, but you can set up custom actions for clicking a certain button, right? Accessing a certain page. I'm just going to do a general one here for landing on the website. Then we can do a different type of trigger, right? So here in this case, you're either going to build something custom with JavaScript. That's a whole separate video. or you're essentially going to be doing a chat invite. And here we can say, hey, if you have been on the site, you've accessed more than 4 pages, we want to actually instigate a chat saying anything I can help you with, right? So this will automatically go out, reach out to that visitor and try to engage with them, right? And now keeping in mind what I showed before, won't really count as a chat until they respond, right? And then one of your operators will be able to pick it up, right? And now it counts as a chat, and you've actually increased the amount of engagement by just automating this happening in the background. So really powerful tool. I would say if you have any intention of proactively chatting, right, and not just waiting for them to chat with you, set it up with a trigger, right? Because the only other way to proactively chat, like we mentioned, is kind of from this live view. And this is very easy when there's one visitor on the site. If you have, 1,000 visitors on the site, all of a sudden this becomes a kind of tricky way to like sub-select and engage them. So just something to consider. Those triggers are really great, and they're only going to start counting at your like chat metrics when the user actually responds. Visitor routing, these are essentially going to be ways that you can set up where different types of people or different types of visitors get routed to specific types of operators, right? So if, let's say, the landing page URL, let's say they landed on zenatta.com/finance, right? Well, maybe I want to direct them to John, our director of finance, because if they have questions about our finance services and they put a chat in place, it should probably go to the person who's best to answer that, which is not me, right? I'm not an accountant. So they might have those types of questions that are just better handled by somebody else. So here, essentially, we're then able to either route them one by one, route them to the least loaded operator, or route them to a pre-selected operator. So as you can imagine, you might have a lot of routing rules, right? You might have a very general one for a homepage that just goes into a round robin. In this case, maybe I want to say, hey, if they came in from a certain place, they should be routed to me, or they should be routed to a operator at a department, right? Maybe I have a finance department set up already and there's 3 people in it. So I just want to force that chat down a particular path to make sure that they're best served by somebody on our team who can actually help them appropriately. Now, chat routing, this is really similar, except it's only going to trigger once they chat, where visitor routing is basically saying, hey, these have been kind of assigned to an operator before they've even chatted. Again, this really comes into play if you are actively engaging them, right? If you're not going to actively engage them with chats, you probably only need chat routing and you don't need visitor routing at all. Call routing is exactly the same, but for calls. A lot of the times you'll have a duplicate set of rules in these 2 sections. Now, lead and company scoring, these are really powerful, especially when it gets into like your CRM integration. I'll show it for lead scoring, but just know that company scoring is the same thing, except it's going to roll up all people that have been identified to be at the same company into a sum, right? So just the sum of the scores that the leads underneath a company have taken. And so here we can essentially look at this and see, right out of the gate, these are all just default scoring rules that come out of the box. But so, coming back after a chat, accessing more than 5 pages, that shows some level of interest, right? Some level of intent that you can then roll up via score values. Now, an important thing to keep in mind, score values are totally arbitrary. They don't actually matter if you give them 10 or 100, right? The only thing that matters is the relative score between different actions, right? So here what we're saying, like 100 under this contacted and 50 under triggered reply don't matter. The only thing that matters is that this is twice as valuable as this, right? So this could be 510, this could be 2550. Again, it's all a relative scale. If we need to add additional rules, again, very similar to our previous engine. So maybe if the search engine is, Bing, let's say, not sure who that would be, we want to give them minus 1,000 points, right? Because Bing, come on. Use something else, right? Obviously, I'm just joking around there, but you can create these rules to essentially be based on any set of parameters that SalesIQ is able to track, right? Everything from visits to chats to specific pages to recurrence of visits, right? They come back regularly. We are able to assign those various scores to them. Now, company scoring, again, this is very similar, right? These are all kind of the same types of, scoring rules that we'll have with a lead, but I do want to show it is dependent on doing data enrichment, right? And so data enrichment is essentially using a third-party tool, something like Clearbit, for example. A user accesses the site from an IP address. Many IP addresses are known to be correlated with certain companies, right? So it can kind of expand your data a bit automatically and then start running the scoring rules against those companies. Very powerful if you're doing account-based prospecting, right? Because you can actually get a good idea of how many people across a particular company are engaging with us. And are there people at a company that are more engaged than others? Last but not least, we do have the ability to schedule out particular reports out to different teams of people, right? So I could go ahead and say, hey, send out a report about all leads who came in, today to the sales team, right? Or to a distribution list that's going to go out to that particular team. Again, a lot of the reports inside of SalesIQ are not supremely customizable. So oftentimes we'll end up pulling that data over to something like Zoho Analytics, right? Just to give a lot more insight into what specific things are going to be sent out on a regular basis. So that kind of covers it on the automate side. I would say it breaks down into kind of three main categories. You have the most open kind of triggers, right, for engaging them in a proactive chat. You have a couple different ways of doing routing. So you're basically saying, based on info about their visit, who should be the team or individual who engages with them, if they're to chat us, if they're to call us. And then lastly, you have the ability to run score, right? And this is basically just assigning numerical values to different actions that they can take on the website, so that you can determine who's good, who's bad, who's worth chasing. Now, this part 2 of automations comes in when we look at bots. And we actually have 2 videos on the site covering like one video for Zobot, one video for AnswerBot. We'll leave links to those in the descriptions below. Highly recommend checking those out. So I'm not going to go into every bit of nitty-gritty detail here, but I will show kind of what these are and how they break down. So before I look at the specifics, it's important to know the functional difference between these two. So a Zobot is essentially a pre-programmed chat that should follow a flowchart, right? So, hello, nice to meet you. Are you a existing customer or a new customer, right? They click existing customer, goes down that path, right? Ask them, hey, what's your customer account number, right? They put that in, goes down another path. Something like an answer bot, this is different. This is natural language processing to try to give them answers that you might already have, right? So again, answer bot, a lot easier to set up, right? You're not actually setting up predefined flows, but a Zobot will build them towards a much more targeted outcome, right? Booking a meeting, placing a call, giving us their email, right? Things like that, you should be thinking, let's use a Zobot for. So if we look at just an example Zobot here, a couple things at a high level. So we can define that only certain pages will the Zobot be active, right? This is very powerful because you might not want it on every page, right? They can be a little much. So maybe it's only on pages that have something to do with actually getting in touch with us, contact us, or pricing, right? Or maybe we want to say if they've been on the site for a long time, they've come back to the site multiple times, then I want to engage this kind of targeted Zobot. Now, when it gets into the actual bot builder here, this is where you'll start to see, right? Yep, this is just a flowchart, right? So they start, the bot engages with them. These are going to be the prompts, right? Do you want to chat with support, chat with sales, or I'm just browsing? Basically give them a leave me alone option. Highly recommend a leave me alone option for any bot-based chat. These can be great and they can serve people what they need very quickly. But some people don't like them. So you want to allow them to just tell it to leave them alone. So we'll see it kind of works through these flows. So if I say support, it's going to ask me my name, my email, how we can help, right? And then here, it's essentially trying to connect us out to an agent, right? Whereas if we're looking at chat with sales, well, now we're going to get a little more info. Oh, are you interested in talking pricing? Are you interested in talking product? Maybe if they talk pricing, we want to share them the pricing page. If they say product, we want to give them a video about our products. And so when you get into it, this is kind of on the right, how we'll test these to make sure that they're doing what we want, right? So I could say, hey, I want to chat with sales. My name is Tyler. My email is, demo email here. We'll see it will always have this connect with human button as well to kind of skip them out of this flow. Now I can click submit, let's say I do say pricing or product, it's actually going to show a video here. We just embedded like a default video, but it can actually show a whole video player within the chat. Did this answer your question? So now it's on to part 2. If I say yes, it'll leave me alone. If I say no, it will connect me to an operator. And so when you're designing a Zobot, you're basically thinking for 2 main benefits, right? 1, reducing man hours. So rather than someone ask what the price is, the bot can just give them the price, right? And if that answered their question, maybe we don't need to talk with them, right? They're just doing some pricing research. Or what it can do is increase the odds of getting to a meeting, right? And so you might decide, hey, you know what? I actually don't want to give them this option. I want to just connect them through to sales, right? If they're even in this path at all, that's totally fine. So you want to start thinking about what's your primary use case for a Zobot. Is it, increasing engagement, increasing bookings, or is it decreasing man hours, answering those types of questions? Again, we have a full video on Zobot that goes through each of those individual kind of blocks that you saw in that flowchart. Now, AnswerBot, this is a whole different game, right? So this is really something that you'll see. The settings here are much simpler, right? An AnswerBot is natural language processing that's going to pull from those resources that I mentioned earlier, right? The FAQ, the articles, the small talk, right? It's going to be looking for answers, right? That have to do with things that we have logged, right? Then we can determine how it should respond. Do we want some default text, right? Things like that. We can define like what its availability should look like, right? So do we want this on all chats? Do we only want this to show up if we don't have operators, right? Some of the controls and options here of when it should engage. And then lastly, what it should do when it can't get an answer, right? And when no one's around. So basically just coding in the failure answers as part of the bot rollout. And so if we jump back to our main page and I go to resources and I go look at FAQs, we have this how to reset my password FAQ. And here, right, I can essentially say what types of questions could be answered by this response. And so this questions list should be long, right? You want to start putting in like everything you can think of that somebody might chat with you in order to get this answer, right? And so now if I come back into my bot here under settings, answer bot, and I'll do my test, and I just chat it password reset, it answers for me right away, right? And so these are great for customer service, right? These can also be great for pricing. But what you'll notice, and again, I broke it down this way kind of intentionally, is that a Zobot can have the 2-pronged approach. It can increase engagement and or reduce man hours. AnswerBot is just reducing man hours, right? It's just giving answers to the person that you would have to provide anyways, but it's doing it in a way that then does not require any labor or manual touch after you've kind of filled out that initial bank of resources. So again, both of these very powerful tools. Both of them we have additional video content on, but definitely recommend taking a look at these. They're very likely to be helpful for your business, even if set up at a very simple level, right? We've set up 3-step Zobots that have had significant improvements and effects on, sales workflows. So well worth considering. And so with that, to make sure we don't run this thing, super over schedule here, let's go ahead and jump into our last section, which will be integrations. Alrighty, so jumping into our last section here for integrations, we're going to go into developers and integrations here. Now, there's a lot of integration you can do custom, right? If you can deluge it, you can do it, right? Because there's a lot of opportunities here to run custom code, especially when it comes to the Zobots. But we are going to cover a lot of the main ones that we work with all the time, right? So a handful here in the Zoho section. Like I mentioned a couple times, I'm a broken record with this. When we get into the fancy, fun reporting, all of this data comes right across into Zoho Analytics. If you're using this for any support, you can actually start a Zoho Assist session, like one of those very structured screen share sessions from right within a SalesIQ bot. Again, thinking on the customer service support side of the aisle, that's very, very helpful. Bookings will integrate natively, so you can actually serve up a link to book a meeting with you. This is something that you can do using the Zobot in particular when it gets into sales. Like if you notice in the flow that I did, if they wanted to connect to sales, it would just do a round robin operator, right? But maybe at the point that you're at in this flow, it's like, hey, you're like ready for a level 2 sales call. So let's just actually get that booked. Here's a Zoho bookings link. Pick a time that works well for you. And all of that's just baked in natively. Zoho campaigns can pull over all leads and contacts as long as they have an email address. You can do your outbound marketing to them. This is actually pretty new. They actually added Zoho Checkout into the SalesIQ chat, so you can actually receive payment right then and there as part of a chat. Pretty useful for certain types of things. Little limited, you're not going to be able to sell like a quote with line items and things like that. But let's say that you do a 2-hour free consultation call, right? And they're going to check out for, $100 and they're going to book this call. They could do this checkout, and once they pay, they could be served up the link to book it, right? So you can actually build some really nice flows there. Now, the big two that we're going to actually click into here are going to be CRM and Zoho Desk. These break down into both the kind of sales and the customer service side of the integrations. So the Zoho CRM one, of course, this is always where we want to go. This just connects directly to your CRM account, and we can determine where new visitors should land on the CRM side. So a new visitor can land as a lead or contact. We can determine who should come in to the CRM integration. This is one of those settings where I very much recommend turning off access, right? Just because someone landed on the site doesn't mean that they should be added as a lead. You'll get a lot of junk data this way. So you really only want them to land as a lead if they chat. Now you might say, you know what? We don't get a lot of traffic. We want it all. No big deal. But for most people, you want to turn that off. Now, when they are created in CRM, they're going to be created with a follow-up task. So here we can set the due date that we'd like that follow-up task to be. A really powerful thing here is setting up thresholds. So as I talked about in the earlier section, when we get into lead scoring, we might want to say, you know what? They're really not worth making a lead until they get to 100 points, right? Like, because maybe your workflow says every lead gets a phone call right away, right? And so you're thinking, you know what? Like, if they just landed on the site once, did a chat, but never came back, never engaged, never did a thing, I don't want to chase them. I don't want to waste my sales team's time, right? So you can actually set up some thresholds around when they should actually get flowed over into CRM. Then we can determine who should actually be assigned these leads. If your sales team is in CRM and in SalesIQ, I recommend you just leave it just like this. Basically say whoever chatted with them, whoever engaged with them, they're going to be the default person who is supposed to work it. Then you could say, hey, what if they never chatted? Who should get it there? Or if we miss the chat, right? Things like that, where we can determine, who that default user should be. Now, last section here under the CRM integration is on the SalesIQ side. We can actually determine what data from CRM we want to show in SalesIQ, right? So once somebody chats and provides that email address, you know who they are, and you know who they are for all future chats. So now you could say, you know what? Every time they come back, I want to see what their current CRM is, right? Because maybe that's valuable for me as I'm prospecting with them. Hey, John, how's the HubSpot install going? Oh, you're overpaying? Let's talk, right? Here's the Zoho bookings link. So this is basically just info that we want to equip ourselves with when we're doing future chats with that lead or contact. We could pull that data from contacts, leads, as well as deals. And so this is actually really powerful. If your customers might come back to the site while you're working a deal with them, this does two things. One, it lets whoever receives that chat know that there's a deal in play. For some organizations, those might be two people, right? Maybe you have, your inside sales team is working the deals, outside sales team is sitting in SalesIQ, right? But you can actually share a little bit of that info back and forth so that they know, hey, this is actually in play, and maybe I should check with the inside sales team before I give them any additional information. So powerful things there within the CRM integration. Jumping back in, the other big one is on the Zoho Desk side. These two apps just get more and more integrated over time. So like nowadays, you can actually run chat out of Zoho Desk, but it's just SalesIQ, right? You get all of this functionality on both sides. So here, looking on the desk side of the house, similar to CRM, we're basically deciding what types of tickets should get converted, or what types of chats, should get converted into tickets. A lot of the times what I say is missed chats, right? You might say, hey, if we actually chatted with them, that's now a sales activity. But if we missed it, we want to follow up through desk. Now, that is not a one-size-fits-all rule, right? You very well might say, you know what, everybody who chats, we want a ticket for, even if the ticket just automatically closes itself if we picked up the chat. I just want that log in desk of all communications. Totally fair game. So it's really just a preference thing. Now, we can also determine when a ticket should be converted from a chat. I normally recommend when we end it. Reason being is that you might not have all the information right when you answer it. So it creates a more complete ticket by logging it once the chat is ended. Then we can say, what should the status be of a chat that's converted as a ticket? For me, most time I'd say closed, right? If it's been converted, I'm now probably going to follow up in desk. I'm probably going to follow up via email or phone. So that chat itself can be closed because it's been handed off to a different application to continue the follow-up. Now, additionally, under the desk integration, we have a similar type of flow where we can map out our particular departments. Again, lots of departments in SalesIQ, lots in desk, want to make sure everything is lined up there. And then last but not least, this is kind of our same flow. What should show up inside of SalesIQ based on what's inside of Zoho Desk, right? So I can essentially say, I want to see any tickets and their due dates if I answer a future chat from that person. This is very, very, very useful for customer service because what happens is, again, thinking that you might have multiple teams. Maybe you have a customer service team that takes inbound requests and they took a request for me. It got handed off to the technical team who only works in desk. And now me as the front-end user, I don't have a lot of visibility into that support ticket anymore. Well, a week later, I come back to the site, I chat again, I get put back with the customer service team, and now they can quickly and easily see, hey, you know what? I see our technical team has a ticket open for you. It's supposed to be done on this upcoming Wednesday. If it's not done by then, please reach back out. Happy to make sure this gets across the line for you. It's really all about that sharing of information when we look at these integrations. And it's very, very powerful, right? That eliminates a text message that has to be sent, right, to someone at the org to determine what's going on with a particular customer inquiry. Now, as we go down the integrations, we're not going to spend a ton of time on the rest of these. I'll call it a couple big ones. Telephony, this is built into Zoho Phone Bridge, right? So if you're on RingCentral, Jive, any GoToMeeting, any of those big options that tie into Zoho, it's going to tie into SalesIQ as well. Analytics, this is kind of some of your on-page analytics, right? So Google Analytics, Tag Manager, things like that. This is essentially just providing the agent additional context, right, based on the visit history of a particular visitor. Appointments, we just got the one right now, that's Zoho Bookings, being able to just integrate, let them book right away. Data provider and data enrichment, these are kind of two sides of a coin. These are for the IP address. This is where you're actually looking up an IP to get a company. Enrichment is you're looking up an email to get a company. So it just depends on what you have, right? Whichever one of these might work better. If you're consistently getting emails, use enrichment. It's going to be more accurate for you. CRM, of course, we have Zoho CRM and that will not be named over here as predefined integrations for SalesIQ. Email marketing, these are just ways where you can tie in a name and an email address into a variety of different services. So a couple of the big names, ActiveCampaign, Constant Contact, MailChimp, all of those supported, as well as, of course, Zoho Campaigns. Help desk-wise, we got the two big names in the room, Zoho Desk and Zendesk. Very similar integration for Zendesk, right? Completed missed chats, writing over to create tickets. And then last but not least, as we mentioned, Zoho Checkout. Google Translate, which is relatively new. This is kind of sweet, right? If you are doing business cross borders or cross languages, being able to invoke a translation, even if it's not perfect, right? Google Translate's not perfect, but it's a lot better than I would do without Google Translate, right? So being able to just tie that into the workflow is pretty great. ChatGPT, right? The new hotness, everybody wants this. Really important to really highlight like what this does in SalesIQ. This does not replace using a bot. This does not replace using agents. It's not supported or not wise to just put ChatGPT between you and your customer for managing an entire conversation. It could give them bad information. It could give them wrong and outdated, you just don't know, right? But what you can do with it, right, is summarize a previous communication, enhance or rephrase things that you're chatting. This is great. Very, very powerful, right? Like write a quick thing, tell ChatGPT, make it sound good, right? That's a huge, huge time saver. And then it will start actually learning about what types of tickets and chats come in and assign tags to them for categorization and reporting. So again, ChatGPT, it's not replacing agents, it's not replacing bots, it's augmenting the actions that we're already taking. But it does do it in a very sophisticated and useful way. But that should pretty much cover it here on the integrations piece. Again, we do have some additional content around SalesIQ that is not outdated, right? Those specific videos on the Zobot and AnswerBot, I think would be really useful if you want to dive in more on those particular topics. But this should pretty much wrap it up for us here today. So as always, we'll go through our end spiel here. If you have any questions for me, or if you'd like to get in touch with anybody here at the Zenatta team, please head over to zenatta.com and click on Book a Meeting. We'd love to talk. In addition, on our website is where you'll find our weekly podcast, the CRM Zen Show, where we cover all the news in the world of Zoho every single week. If you'd like that news delivered to your inbox every Monday morning, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. And last but not least, as always, if you found this video useful, please be sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube, as well as your choice of podcast app. See you next month for our next full product tutorial. Bye.